Peace be with you, my friend. I'm Bob Wilhelm, and I'm a storyteller. Today's story is for the beginning of Lent, the beginning not only of the Lenten season, but the Lenten journey that we all take during this time of year. It's the time of great renewal. It's a time of setting out from the familiar and journeying into the unknown. That's the theme of the story by Leo Tolstoy that I've adapted for Parables today. I call it Pahom's Wish. It's generally translated into English with the title of How Much Land Is Enough? But the story has a larger context that I don't include in the story simply because I tell a shorter version for the sake of homilies and catechesis where a long story may not fit. Though in a informal storytelling setting, I will expand the story from its 10, 12, 15 minutes all the way up to 25 or 30 minutes because there's enough material in it to really spin out a good story. So I'd like to tell you the beginning of the story to help you understand the profounder context in Tolstoy's mind of what the story is about and to look at the themes of the Lenten journey as well. The story begins with what in Russian is called a priskaski. A priskaski is an opening story, a little story before the main story that is set in juxtaposition to it. It doesn't have to be included in the story. You can tell the main story without the priskaski. And the priskaski really does feel like its own little parable. But by setting the two side by side, it illuminates a very important aspect of the story. It's a very lovely technique used in Russian storytelling that I think people who are English storytellers could well adapt for our own use. So the priskaski in the story itself, Pahom's tale, is the story of a man who goes out on a journey, ever seeking greater riches and more land for himself. And the question, of course, the moral question is, just how much land is enough? How much wealth do I need? What kind of benefits do I need in my retirement plan? What kind of income do I have to make on a daily or weekly or a yearly basis? And we know that there's never enough. There's never enough because our desires, we desire more. And we think we are poor when we are really wealthy. And this illusion, this real illusion, is what is part of the sickness of our society. But to go back to the story, Pahom therefore is moving the story along with his main theme of how much land is enough. But the implications of his quest and the nature of his quest is illuminated by that priskaski. And this is the way the priskaski works in this story. Pahom is about to fall asleep at night. He's sitting in the warm, he's laying in the warm place by the Russian fireplace where peasants usually sleep in winter nights because it's the only, being up against the fireplace or on top of the fireplace is about the only place that's warm enough during those cold nights. And he's hearing his wife and his wife's sister have a conversation that almost turns into an argument. And it's about the advantages and disadvantages of leading a country life or a city life. So his sister-in-law is speaking about all the good things that can happen if you live in a sophisticated city. The advantages that you have, education, your social life, your business life, the opportunities for your children, etc., etc. While Pahom's wife is speaking about the goodness of rural life, a simple life, all your needs are met, you're not distracted by illusions, and so forth. Well, the two sisters go back and forth until they're almost fighting. When they suddenly realize the foolishness of it, they've chosen different paths and they both lead their lives. And they laugh, they sip some tea to end the evening, and they go to sleep reconciled. Now, Pahom has been listening to this, and he's been agreeing with his wife with every one of her statements, identifying with her as a country person, a farmer. And at the end, he says something that I include in the opening of the story that I tell for Parables today. And he says, what a person needs, what a farmer needs, that's himself, what a person needs is enough land. and then he will be happy. And then he adds the additional statement that gives the moral quality to the story. He says, if a man has enough land, he wouldn't feel, he actually says this of himself, if I had enough land, I wouldn't be afraid of the devil himself. Now this is a warning in classic storytelling. This is going to come back. This statement's going to come back and haunt him. So that's why it needs to be said at the beginning of the story, as I do. But it's really the ending of a separate little pre-story that sets the tone for the big story of Pahom's journey and his wish. So let's move to the end of the story. And the end of the story is that we find a great paradoxical kind of a surprise ending, the kind of ending that you would expect from a short story writer of the caliber of an O. Henry, for example. It's not a surprise in how it ends, but it's a surprise in the phrasing that the character at the end uses to close the story. And he very dramatically answers the question, how much land does a person need in order to be happy? So I invite you to listen to that story as a way of discovering that. You won't be surprised at the ending, but it's done very, very well. In the story, and this is why I think it's a wonderful Lenten story, and only a person like Tolstoy could get away with something like this, because it's a very risky strategy. And in the story, the devil will appear again and again and again. He will have heard what Pahom said, and he will therefore tempt him. He'll tempt him a number of times. It'll be like the temptation of Christ in the desert that opens the first Sunday of Lent this year. And he will appear in many guises. He will appear as a wealthy farmer. He will appear as a merchant. He will appear as a successful landowner, kind of a lesser nobility. He will appear as a chieftain, an important political and military person, and so forth. It doesn't really make any difference what the specific appearance is, but here Tolstoy has given a face to the tempter. And it's a balance to his very wonderful story that's generally called the story of Martin the Cobbler. And in that story, we have another parallel to the gospel in Jesus appearing at the end of the story, and Martin asks, essentially, he asks the biblical question, when did I see you? When did I see you? And when did I take care of you? Because I'm not aware that I did. I just took care of these various other people. And Jesus responds with that very powerful saying, whenever you did it to the least of these, you have done it to me. So what Tolstoy has done, I think, as a storyteller, he's taken that image, because in his Martin the Cobbler, he has Jesus appear as many unlikely characters from street life in Moscow in the 19th century. But in their faces, there is behind their face the presence of our Lord. And Tolstoy has transferred this into this story so that we have the evil one, not faceless, which is generally how I think we're more comfortable imagining the evil one, but given a face that is the face of all those people who are, and I have to say this because I think this is part of the spirituality of the Lenten season, they are the successful ones of the world. They are the ones who have managed to succeed and prosper. And in their prosperity, they tempt others to seek that prosperity out, saying, this is what you will do to be happy. If you do this, you will be happy. This is the temptation of our culture, of our times. We have the constant projection of images of what beauty and wealth and power, those three things, will do to make us happy people. And of course, it is an illusion. It is the temptation in the desert. It is the temptation that Christ faced, but that we now face in our own time. And we have to ask ourselves the question of just how much is enough? What do we really need to be happy? What do we really need? That's what this story is about. Blessings upon you on this Lenten journey. May it be filled with stories, and may you find your way to Easter morning. I'm Bob Wilhelm. I'm a storyteller.